Hello and welcome to the Engineer Your Success, Leadership, and Life Harmony Like a Mother show. I'm your host, Kini Romanovska, award-winning investigative journalist turned maternity leave and working motherhood strategist. And the reason we're here with you is because becoming a new mom or a working mom is a huge identity shift. Everything changes for you, and you should never be alone trying to figure out your career life and your family life. So that's why we bring you the best guests, mentors, and experts. And today is a person who has a very special place in my heart. There is so much intersection. We're both from Europe. We're both musicians. We're both moms, Merel, mom of three. And we're both so passionate about empowering women. Well, Merel, you will say beings, right? So you've had a rebrand recently. We can talk about that. But to really step up into like your full potential and blossom and make tons of money doing so. So welcome, Merel.
Thank you so much for having me. As you are already listing, it's like just bring it back into my awareness, like how many things we do have in common. I grew up, I think, only 30 kilometers away or something from where you went to the conservatoire to study music in Holland, which is like thousands of kilometers away from here. So, just so amazing. You were even just sharing before we hopped on that your husband used to as a kid get like their eggs, etc., in the little town, which is like a blip in the middle of nowhere, when he grew up. And that's where I currently live. So there's just like tons and tons of things that sort of miraculously tie us together. So that's just wonderful. I'm super excited to be speaking today. Super curious to sort of have you pop some questions into this shared space and to dive in.
Absolutely. And I haven't really read your full bio and fully introduced you. So let's talk about what you do. Again, Merel helps humans become the wealthiest beings in their lineage. And so she is, and I'm reading here, she's a global business development company, right? She runs Merel Kriegsman Media, global business development company dedicated to helping you become the wealthiest being in your lineage. How? By showing you how to solve whatever you want, whenever you want, and at whatever price point you want, through offering white glove business mentorship or black leather, whatever you prefer. 1,000 plus down to earth luminaries with a hunger for social environmental justice have experienced the financial breakthrough of a lifetime. And last year alone, they added a combined 25 million in yearly revenue to their bottom line. So I'll be connecting more the dots on how that fits for many of you because you are so passionate about many causes. Merel has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, ABC News, Entrepreneur. Spot her in the wild reading erotic novels or playing with her kids on her organic farm wearing a 1920s lace dress and rubber boots. So thank you for joining us to talk about all of that. Many women listening here are in high-powered careers, and many women who are also mothers happen to find out they're not earning as much as they would like to. So when we're talking about making what you want, when we talk about the world of business and sales, even if you don't own your own business, you are selling every day. You are selling kale to your kids. You are selling your ideas at work. You are selling life choices to your family all the time, right? And so that positioning and knowing the value is so critical. Why are you excited to speak to our group of high-powered women? I think a lot of the work that women in our community do is about building a better future and a better earth, right? So we talked about their professions. Your community has a lot of entrepreneurs who are focused on sustainability, like regenerative practices, permaculture, right? You are growing a food farm. So what is it that excites you about our conversation today?
What excites me is reminding the women who are listening that the nudges, right, that you feel inside around, should I be making more? Could I be making more? Is there more possible? Could this be easier? Right? It's like, these are such important moments, right? And we tend to just gloss over them as in like, yeah, right? Like whatever, my career path is set, or my kids are the way that they are, or right. And when you cultivate the practice of actually going like, okay, I'm not going to push that back down. I'm not going to tell myself that this is just how it is. Right. And instead, I'm going to engage with whatever whatever bubbles to the surface, even if that feels or sounds unreasonable at the time, right? So if we have anyone listening who's like, you know what, I would love to make $100,000 more a year than I currently do, right? Or I really have the capacity to be in a position that has more responsibilities and more leadership. Or, right, I would love to have another baby and I don't know how that's going to work, right? Can you allow yourself to have that dream blossom all the way open, right, without shutting it down, even if, right, in that moment it sounds or feels unreasonable, right? I don't have time for another baby, right? I don't have, like, the capacity to go in and have that conversation about wanting a raise, or I don't know how to navigate that, right? Can you first just allow for it to fully open up, right, as that desire that you have inside of yourself, without trying to sort of wanting to have like the strategy already in place, right? So that's what I'm super excited talking about with you today.
Why do you talk about this specific way? Because it's very unique, right? So you're
Yeah.
talking blossoming into the ideas, and whereas when anybody's thinking about, again, getting a raise or building wealth, it's like, well, I need to do XYZ, show me the plan. I need to invest, I need to save more, I need to perform more, I need to work more.
Yeah.
You're talking
Mhm.
about this like art and
Yes.
music, and just in very dreamy terms. What's the choice of words behind all of that? Was the it's
Yeah, I
why?
think part of it is just how my brain works. I mean, we're both artists, right? So you're an instrumentalist. I'm a vocalist. Right? Used to sing as an opera singer in Europe. So I think I just tend to approach things from a slightly different perspective. But here's what I know too, right? Unless we allow ourselves to dream, right, and to ponder and to muse, um, you won't find, right, the inner conviction needed to see through like the incredible detail orientedness that you need to build wealth, right, and the practices that you need to put in place, and the systems that you need to put in place, and the people you will want to hire to mentor you and to guide you on that journey, right? That takes tremendous fortitude, right? Especially because so many of us bring lots of patterns and conditioning into that conversation, right? We talk about that very often, Kenya, right? It's like the how our parents used to be with money. I just started working with somebody who is the child of survivors, right? Holocaust survivors, right? So it's like all those things play a role, right? All the stories that you grew up with, and sometimes those are not even expressed, right? They just sort of live as narratives, as like assumptions in sort of like how your family deals with money, whether they talk about money, right? All of those things matter so deeply. So if you don't take the emotional side into consideration, what it will feel like is like a soulless sort of like pushing for what and for the sake of whom, right? And it won't be sort of alive, right? We want your relationship with wealth and with what it is that you desire to be fully alive, right? A living, breathing organism, for it to be able to grow and evolve, right? And that's a choice that we have if we remember that we have it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, why could new motherhood? So your story, if you want to share, it's kind of like a rags to riches story. I don't know if you use those terms, but why is when we're maybe feeling the most vulnerable and small, possibly even as a mother, right? It's just you're like we're
Mm,
stripped of. It's just such the act of creating life, right? Like, there's so
yeah.
much surrender involved, and I think those instincts of wanting to be protected and held, and then protecting our own children, and but at the same time feeling so vulnerable, right? And
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
I don't know how much you know about our maternity leave system in Canada for people who are employed. Is you get this employment insurance, and all of a sudden you feel like you're shrinking. There's less money coming in, and on the one hand,
Yeah. Yeah.
giving amazing life, but then there's so much less money coming in. Why is this the perfect time to change your wealth barometer?
Well, I think it offers a unique opportunity to really start choosing an inner set point around wealth, right? Rather than have it be sort of dictated by whatever you see coming into your bank account, right? You identify with that, and then all of a sudden it isn't there anymore, which could cause the shrinking. But you could also go like, okay, what if I stop making what I feel is possible dependent on what I'm currently seeing in my bank account or what I currently see coming in, right? Because what I'm currently seeing coming in doesn't feel good. So, right, you have that window of time where you can start to really see that being attached to like an external sort of barometer might not be the best thing for, your financial well-being and future, right? So I personally believe that, I love juxtapositions. It's actually a word that came up first in a like song cycle masterclass that I did, just for your information, Kenya. It was like juxta. It was like just such an interesting word. Let's look it up in the dictionary. And I was like, oh, yeah. Like I love this, right? This I think generally speaking, right, there is just a sort of culture, right, in our society where we're comfortable with the emotions that are sort of in the middle of that vast range of emotional shades, right? It's all good as long as it's sort of like in the middle, right? We're comfortable with our jobs, we're comfortable with our lives, we're comfortable, right, crying sometimes, laughing sometimes. But motherhood, what it does is it pushes us right into like the very sort of like edges of that full range of our own humanity and our own, the emotional expressions that go with it. And I tend to experience it if I go more in one direction, I also start to feel that expansion in the other direction. So when I go into the direction of, extreme vulnerability, right, which is so intrinsically linked with young motherhood, being, having young life to right, first growing inside of you, and then the birthing process, and then right, having young life to tend to. But at the same time, right, you never go just in one direction. It just goes from the middle in like both directions. And when it does, right, you also start to have access to that fierce mama bear, sort of just like, it's this unstoppable, right, energy of you know what, like, I want this, I'm gonna get this for myself, for my cubs, right? I remember too, right, if you want me to share a little bit about my story. So, I used to sing, and that was like successful as a career path, but it was very unsuccessful financially. Um, and so I reached a point where I was pregnant with our first child, and I was just so sick and tired of this industry, right? Where we're expected to be very happy with exposure instead of money. And so I actually decided to blow up that career for the sake of going on this quest to like figuring out wealth and money and marketing and sales. And for the first while, that actually looked like me biking around town, cleaning toilets and homes, with a big pregnant tummy, on a bike. Um, and that was totally fine. It actually felt really, really empowering. And then, we moved to Canada. I was sort of thrust into an unexpected role as a sole provider for a family, with, while still nursing, while having a 2-year-old, right? It was, those were two different babies, by the way. Like we had like the first two, like really.
When it happened, he still nurses. Doesn't seem like my second one. Doesn't seem like he's about to stop anytime soon, which is fine. We have a lot of fun. But anyway.
Yeah. Right. So hands very, very full. And then on top of that, my husband was like, I don't like it when you work in the evenings. Like I want my Merel back, right? And on the weekends. So my personal journey was really around like, okay, so I'm not gonna work weekends, I'm not gonna work in the evenings. I better learn how to charge, a lot of money for what I do, because otherwise it's not going to work out. That's exactly what I did. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And now you are 3 babies. And last week you juxtaposed your highest sales targets with a story of pee on your arm.
Yeah. So my next goal is $250,000 a month, and that might sound really wild, but you also, I always add to that we have about $100,000 in expenses every month. Right? So it's very costly running a business at this scale. So yeah, I was just doing like sales activities and stuff like that, and all of a sudden I realized that I'm doing like this workshop series, right, to get our clients to feel excited about hopping on calls with us and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. My youngest, who were potty training, just peed on my sleeve. But, here's the thing, right? I think that a lot of moms feel shame around some of the things that make it so visible that they are a young mother, right? Like sort of like the leaking boobs, the needing to take themselves out of the right the busyness of what's happening, right? Projects to go and pump, or to right, maybe even to take more days off, right? Especially now with COVID and some right falling through of daycare, and God knows what, right? It's really intense. um and what I've always found, and of course, I'm in business, right? So it's a little bit different. I'm an entrepreneur, but it's sort of just like, if there's less of you, right, to be had, also for your company, that means that, how would I say this? There's more demand than there is supply, basically, right? Basic economics. So instead of feeling that, you or agreeing with a reality where you're valued less because you are a young mother, right, or a mother to young children, um, go the opposite direction. Why not? Right? Think of yourself as extra valuable, because now they need to, they have to rely on getting what they need from you within less hours. So they better figure out, how to make the most of having you in their company. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I couldn't resist the pee story when you were talking about juxtaposition. Talk about sales. So,
Yeah.
and this month in our community is personal branding. A lot of people are designing a personal brand statement so they can get
Excited.
next job and next promotion. And many, like some of the success stories we hear in our community, I got a promotion during my maternity leave or straight out of my maternity leave. I'm building my $10 million wealth plan, where before they were ashamed to put a number, and now they're like, that's what I want, and now I know
Yeah.
how I'm doing there. So fun to see those types of stories. So sales. So in business, it's pretty straightforward, right? Straightforward. We can debate that, but essentially, you're exchanging a service or a good for a certain amount of money, and then you position yourself, right? And same thing in
Yeah.
personal branding. If you're within a corporation or a company or looking for a different job, you have to know your value. You have to know how to sell it, position it,
Yeah.
advocate for yourself. What are the biggest roadblocks that you see, that could be applied from the business world to women or anybody who's feeling somewhat vulnerable or stretched, however,
Mhm, mhm.
that keeps them from getting paid what they want, what they're worth, and
Yeah.
even dreaming bigger? You and I were having conversations. You told me like dream big, and it just got me dreaming like super, super big and actually believing it's possible.
Yeah.
So what are the? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of just when, essentially, right? And that,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
For me, I would say, for all of you listening, if you are in a positioning position, I want to talk about positioning, y'all. Like, that's one of my favorite topics. Now, when you are in that position, where you do feel that vulnerability, right, and maybe you are coming back into the company that you've worked for before, right, after maternity leave, maybe you are right in a transition, you start to look at a position that's a better fit, right, but you're in a place where you need to sort of like prove yourself and your worth, maybe towards a new group of people. um I find that most people in my community anyway struggle with what I call credibility amnesia, right? So we actually tend to forget how awesome we are. We tend to forget the all the incredible things that we've done, right, or experienced that actually give us credibility. So I would say start by just giving yourself the assignment to write down, 20, 25 things that give you credibility in the job that you either want to enter or like re-enter into, and to just make that list for yourself as a reminder that you are hot shit, right? It's like you're amazing. You've just forgotten, right, some of those pieces because you've been so busy cleaning diapers and nursing and sleep deprivation and who am I again, like the identity crisis, right? So anchor yourself in the truth of the fact that you know what you're talking about, right? So these can be the things on the list can be career accomplishments, they can be credentials that you have, places you've studied, projects you've successfully led, right? But it can also be, right, like for example, for me, one of the things that made that list is that I've home birthed all our three children, one of which was an unassisted home birth, and the other one, the our last baby, um, she was born in within 90 minutes, right? It was just like this whirlwind birth, and she was very close to 10 pounds, and I didn't tear for the first time ever. So I was like, yay, it didn't tear, right? So these of course, right, you don't all want to share those with your new employer necessarily, especially that last one. I didn't tear, I deserve this job, right? But also, right, it's just like, again, like that anchoring in the truth about you, right? So I would say do that first, and then also craft a wish list for yourself. Like, what are the things that you want to see in this new role, right? In the work environment, in the benefits, in the opportunities that you get within that role, right? So that you're not entering the conversation sort of like, I'll just, whatever you can give me, right? Like, I'll take it, but rather like being really, really clearly defined in this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, right? That confidence will shine through. People pick up on that. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that. When I went on my first maternity leave, I had a job in communications. And so I used the graphic design software to write down my whole path. Like I
I
had
love it.
an OT team. And so I was like, this is when I joined you. This is me with a pregnant belly. And it was my welcome back to work letter. So I wrote it before I went because I knew things would happen. And so then I wrote all the hopes I had for myself when I was coming back. And when I came back from that first job, the whole team changed. New boss, knew everything. But I had that little piece of paper where I wrote down why I was hot shit. So then drew it and doodled it. And I still remember that little icon, like a mom with the little belly and the hand and the little heart. It's kind
Oh, that's so
of,
sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Such a lovely thing to do too. It's like, I
So
love it.
what I'm gathering, absolutely the credibility amnesia, and then what you want. Why is it so important to combine both and not just look at the past, but also look at the desires?
Because otherwise we're just recreating what we've already done and experienced, right? We're just gonna sort of like go off of our default setting as like, this is the reality, this is what's possible. And what I will say too is that when you start doing some of that work, right, and you realize your value and you realize that there are certain things that you would really love to see, that feels extremely vulnerable, right? Like most of us will have tremendous resistance to that work because we feel if we just take the right steps, like we can earn, right, sort of that next level of income or those next kinds of like opportunities. But that's actually not how it works, right? Not in a corporation, not in the entrepreneurial world. There is no sort of like set list of like, if I just do these things, like I will land here, right? That landing here,
First bubble, I was hoping for a checklist, but no, I'm just kidding. But
it's like, I want the checklist. I
yes.
know, right? But this is the thing. It's a very interesting topic, actually, and I love talking about this. So when if you are a checklist person, right, and you crave sort of, you're just like, give me the checklist. It's actually like an addiction to surety, right? And this idea of, if I do all of those things, then I can deserve this reality that I would love to see unfolding. But the fact of the matter is that none of us can deserve a certain reality, right? It's like, that's a lovely thought, but life is much too unpredictable, right? We are not as in control as we would like, right? So if you can let go, right, of that pattern and that holding of like, I can do these things and then it will translate into X, right? When you let that go and really allow to sort of dance with the unknown, right? To dance with chaos, to dance with the real fabric of life, you also set yourself free simultaneously from, right, this idea of, sure, if you can deserve it, that's great. But in that same sort of frame of mind, or that approach to reality, you can also undeserve it, right? And feel unworthy of something good happening in your life because you didn't do the checklist. And then there's like this sort of dissonance. So when you move beyond this, right, the deserving, undeserving, the did I do the checklist, did I not do the checklist, it is really freeing, because then you no longer are beholden to, I have to deserve good things, right? Or I have to do certain things to have good things happen to me, right? And so I moved completely away from the word deserving, because it's also very tricky from a privilege perspective, right? Says who? You deserve this thing. Says who? According, right? It's like, it's very, very fuzzy, and intangible. And instead, right, just say, I desire this. And that making those statements, it does feel like you're just like floating out into the ocean. And it's like, and I have nothing to hold on to, right? Except just like purely that desire. I desire this. I would love for this to happen. And in the end, that's something you can actually build on, right? It's solid ground. It's not on this, build on this, like, did I do the thing? Do I deserve it? Do I not deserve it? Am I worthy? Am I not worthy? Right? So that whole conversation takes up so much space, especially when it comes to sales, right? It's like the whole that whole mindset piece that's connected to it. Yeah. And then the other thing, Kenia, is always, what is the boldest thing that you can ask for? Right? That's a really important question. Do you dare to make the ask, right? And maybe move through a period where you're getting a lot of rejection in order to land on the yeses you would love to hear, right? That's another piece of that puzzle. Yeah.
I like that a woman in our community asked for the highest raise in her company's history. She got it, reducing her work days to 4 per week. We're just all thrilled when we're hearing that. And
Yeah.
we were just living vicariously through that success. You and I were having a chat about finance the other day, about Pluto and finance. And
Yeah.
you were talking discipline, right? So talking about all of this beautiful stuff like desire and surrender, and
then Merel's like, like, when it comes to finance.
Well, so you told me, well, finance is one thing that thrives in discipline. So how do you have the dance of the desire and then the very concrete actions it steps?
Yeah, exactly.
You and I kind of dance in the same environment in terms of business mentorship. And so, there are those who are with that, like, take this action, do this number of things, and you can expect this type of outcome. Boom, 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 boom. You're in the driver's seat. You're in control. You can decide how much money you're going to make. And like, if you don't get the results, it's your own damn fault. There's some of that, right? And so, the value of accountability is very important to me too. And, I find myself, if I go too far in that energy, I lose my voice. I feel depleted. I feel like sometimes I've given it my all, and yet maybe I'm not immediately seeing the results I'm seeking. So how do you engage in the conversation about the dancing of those two energies, the surrender, the desire versus the need to take action and do follow some steps?
Yeah. I would say it's almost a little bit like the image that I have in my head for myself, but then again, I'm a Leo, right? Like we were talking about planets and
Aries here.
astrology, right? So I'm actually picturing myself as a lion or right, like some kind of predator out there in the wild, right? And when you look at their behavior, right, a lot of it is actually, it looks rather calm and still and sort of like they're resting, but they're not really fully resting. They're also keeping like their eyes open for what's out there in the valley. And then all of a sudden they pounce, right? So um I think that one of the most dangerous things that we can do is actually think of ourselves within that binary of like either I'm switched on or I'm switched off, or either I'm dreamy or I'm practically implementing, right? And that creating that sort of illusion of the divide, right? Like you can embody both at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And also when you look at there's really skilled hunters out in the wild, right? It's it looks very, very calm and very still until they pounce, right? And all of a sudden then it's super effective. So I think we can all borrow a little bit more of that, right? So that's first of all. And then when you have the clear vision, right, and you feel whatever that desire is very keenly in your body, right, literally you're embodying it, then there's also all of a sudden like an instinct available to you,
Mm.
right, around what is most important and what isn't, and having tremendous discernment, right, in your life in general, and how to sort of manage that flow of energy and not deplete yourself, or just sort of go like, you know what, I'm just gonna like fully deplete myself, and then I'm gonna just take a week off and lay in the bed and watch Netflix, and right, to sort of have a playful relationship to that rather than a, oh, I depleted myself. Like, I'm such a bad person. I'm so like ungoddessy, right? Sort of feelings and judgments about yourself. And instead just go like, okay, so right now, like what's the medicine? Do I need to have a little bit more pouncing? Do I need to have a little bit more resting? Do I need to have the forward, or do I want to just like lay back, or maybe even right do some forward activity, some tangible, right, relationship building and messaging and forwarding of your resume, while lying on the couch with one baby on one boob, and just generally sort of semi watching a movie with your partner, right? It's all good. I would say like be willing to sort of like design how to make that work for yourself, instead of have like pretending that you're a machine with an on and the off button. Yeah.
My brain is going in so many different directions. Surprise, surprise. Like on the one hand, I want to talk to you about being a mom in the prairies on a food farm. On the other hand, I'm like, how do you, you talk about with your mentors about sensory economy, and I would be curious about how you see people access, and then your rebrand. I want to talk to you about your rebrand.
Sure. Yeah, we can do all of that.
I think that's interesting to me. Maybe it's a little bit self-serving, but I know that a lot of women would identify as well. So if we come from a heritage that has been quite oppressed, right? And I see that coming up in a lot in wealth mentorship in women, for example.
Yeah.
Like women of Eastern European background or Eastern background, we can have a tendency to be extremely hard on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed that, and I started paying more attention, but like so bloody hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And then you start unraveling, well, where is that coming from? So for me, I detected, coming from a communist country, right? So much oppression in my land. I know I'm white, but I come from a background that has been extremely oppressed. You were talking about somebody working with somebody who's a Holocaust survivor. Like that stuff happened where I was born. It's heavy stuff. I carried for many, many years so much heavy history, like Stalin, Hitler. I grew up with that stuff all the time in my head, right? and in my
Yeah.
heart. So when I was growing my business, I found myself thinking like, I don't want to make more money because it's more problems anyway. And somebody can come and take it away from it, just like they took land from my grandma, just like they took and from my grandpa. And what's the point anyway? And I'm going to wear myself out in the process, right? So how do you find people reclaiming their own humanity beyond the layers of their DNA, their history, their lived experience? Like, tell me stories about people you saw just blossoming from a past that's so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I can just stick with the example too, the one client that I was talking about. You know, with her, I had lots of conversations because what she was doing, right? So sometimes these patterns will also show up in really funny, I was gonna say funny, but also funky ways, right? It's sort
Yeah.
of like a blend of both. So for her in her business, what she was doing was that she was actually serving a target market that wasn't, with the type of work that wasn't fully in her zone of genius, right? It was sort of just like, I feel responsible for these kinds of people. They need this thing. I am able to offer it to them, so I have to, right? Instead of sort of looking at like, hey, what actually brings me the most amount of joy, that sweet spot between, the way that you love to show up and the way that you can make the most money, but also serve at the highest level, right? Like people who are truly poised to have the transformation that you offer. So there was just a settling and a over responsibility, sort of from a perspective of like, that's what you do when you see someone in need. You step in and you help, right? And of course that is a wonderful value, right, to carry through in your life. But also, right, it wasn't serving her from a business level, and she literally went from making a few thousands of dollars, a month, to now setting herself up for what's going to be her first 20K month in February, right? So it's like a big jump. Another example is an alumni of my program who grew up, like, her father died when she was only 2 years old, so she grew up having a single mom. And she was always caught between, well, first of all, right, don't be too loud, because her mom had to take her everywhere. And so her sense of worth would be determined with how quiet was I able to be. Mama, was I quiet enough? Right? So huge visibility issues that she needed to work through, despite the fact that she was has a background as an actor, right? So very, very sort of caught in all of that. And then also, right, this idea of money making can actually be this easy and is allowed to be this easy felt like a disloyalty to her single mom, who had been holding down multiple jobs throughout her entire youth and childhood just to, make ends meet, right? So this is how that stuff shows up. It is so worth exploring, right, for anyone listening. It is so worth exploring, like, what is actually driving your decision making around all of these things, right? How much you're willing to ask for, both from not just the money perspective, but also like that ease perspective, right? Like your client Kenya, right? Amazing breakthrough where she was able to now, get the same or more, right, while working only for 4 days a week. Right, creating an incredible sort of like shift in dynamic for her with her family and her child or children, right? That's so deeply valuable. But that also means that she had to be comfortable receiving that, and probably did some internal work around that as well, right? So
Yeah. There's so much more to this story about people who also disapproved of her asking for a raise, right? It was
yeah,
so interesting to explore. But yes, being comfortable receiving all of that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to talk about first? Life on the prairies or your recent rebrand?
And
And
a reblend. It's like
so your rebrand, which is all but bland. Again, for people who are working on the personal brand statements right now, like thinking bigger, right? And so you just had a session about talking about how far ahead, how big we should dream when we're doing a rebrand. So many people are actually doing that for their own positions. Which which first, life on the prairies or the rebrand that
so
is all
fun.
but
Let's do the rebrand because it's on my mind right now. So first of all, I just wrote like a really extensive blog post on the entire like internal process. It's if you go to merelkriegsman.com and you go to blogs, there's like a branding for leaders. Just like I basically wrote 5 really extensive posts on social media. I've repackaged them as a blog post with lots of pictures in it and fun stuff. So, like if that's where you're at with your career, definitely go hop over, go check it out. And then yeah, my rebrand was really sort of like held back for quite a while because I felt, well, first of all, I don't think I was actually rebrand ripe when I started the process. I needed to do a lot of like internal percolating yet for that to be able to come to fruition. And then once I gave myself a creative brief instead of sort of like, this is the pieces I need to have in place, this is what it needs to look like, right? I still needed to, of course, like write the actual pages of a website in my case, but I gave myself this what I call a creative brief. So if you are into sort of like the kind of shows where there's a creative competition, right? Like whether it's like woodworking or baking or makeup artists or whatever it is, right? They always say like, here's your creative brief for this, week or whatever. And I was all of a sudden like thinking like, hey, of course that makes more sense because, it's far more creative to do that way. So I chose to create this creative brief for myself in which I really aimed to have people land on the website and have like this really almost visceral, instinctual, um, right, immediate sort of emotion bubbling to the surface, maybe even make them weep, right, and to have them sort of be able to melt into this sense of, hey, more is possible for me. I get to have big desires, I get to have big dreams, um right, and this is what that can look like. So that was just so much more fun, and it actually helped me create the damn thing, right? Because I had been postponing and postponing, right? Some of you might recognize that as well. It's like it's when you're doing personal brand, you're selling yourself, right? And for many of us, we've been selling our skill sets and sort of like, what your value can be to a company. But when you're doing like the LinkedIn stuff and the personal brand stuff, it's really about you selling you, and also you potentially being lavishly paid to be you, right? And not just your skill set. And that's a huge difference, right? So I would say go read the blog post. It talks a lot about also like the inevitable identity crisis feelings that bubble to the surface as you engage with, pivoting, rebranding, tweaking of your positioning. But it doesn't all have to be hard and struggle. It can also be like a really rewarding up leveling, right? An upgrade to how the world knows you. So yeah, let's talk about the prairies.
Yes,
What
I wrote that.
anything you wanna know?
How did you end up here from Europe? I know I spent a good part of my life wanting to move back to Europe. So I lived in Denmark, the Netherlands. Like I wanted to live in Istanbul. I don't know if you've been in Istanbul, but it was one of my favorite cities. And when I was
Oh.
doing reading your work, your workshop prompts and thinking about my stories, I had so many exciting stories in my life, like traveling, right? And then
Yeah, yeah.
mom, and now I live in the mid-burbs with my backyard and my fence and the 2 cars and the love of my life, of course. But when I was in my 20s, that's not what I was imagining. And I grew up in Montreal, and I'm in Edmonton now. So it's not what this is not the place I thought I would live. And I
Same.
assume that you were not thinking, I'm gonna live in Osler, Saskatchewan, on a farm.
No, not at all, not at all. And I actually remember coming here the first time, ever on a vacation, with my, then boyfriend, now husband, to visit his parents, and it was just like, "It is just so barren here." Like, I just couldn't wait to get the hell out of here. So no, it was definitely not, my initial plan. For us, it was a decision that was also connected. It was a couple of things. Like we are very aware of sort of like also, right? And I bet that your audience is as well, because that's a lot like the field that they're in. But sort of, this whole transition that's going to happen from, fossil fuels to more sustainable energy, stuff like that. The disruption that can cause also when it comes to like, supply chains, stuff like that. We are called to live in a way that is different from how we grew up. So there was a desire to raise our children with the sense of like, this is how you grow your own food, and this is how you do community, and this is right. Like, for example, one of the things that we do is we save a lot of our own seeds, and right, we just have so much fun, and it's just a completely different way of life that was very available to us because Keith's parents, my husband's parents, they were like, do you want the farm already? Right? Sort of like conversations like that. I don't think they ever expected us to say yes until one day we did. And it was like, oh, wait, what? So that was part of the reason, also, right, to be able to build our business without sort of trying to also make a career happen in Europe, and all the expenses of that involved. It was an amazing opportunity for us, right, and also extremely privileged, right, to have that. If you ever see my content, you'll hear me talk about that a lot, right? The fact that my husband is a white settler and his family is a family of white settlers. I'm a basically uninvited immigrant, right? So there's a lot of story to that as well, and things to talk about that are very important to us. But all of that to say, right, it was available to us, and we decided to come here, but also to make some changes, right? So one of the things that we did is that we're on 160 acres here. So 150, 140 or so of those are farms by a regenerative farmer. And then we are also building a food forest, which is a permaculture project. If you want to just Google what that means, feel free to do so. But it's basically, you walk into like this beautiful area and everything sort of like coexists with other species, and there's like animals and plants, and it all works together perfectly, and every part sort of nourishes the next part. It's very, very regenerative. What we're interested in, and what we've kickstarted last year, is building the structures that we need to basically grow enough food to also be able to contribute to like solving food insecurity problems in our area. So that's all in progress, but also it's a lot. Right, so we're actually in the Saskatoon area, we're trying to find some people who can support us with this project, because it's just having 3 kids. I don't know about you, Kenya, but my kids have been home for the last couple of months while we run the business. And then I sort of don't want to think of like, planting season right now on top of that. It's like, oh my God, are you crazy? But yeah, that's all happening.
A little bit. I've been with our kids. It's like it's been on and off, but yes, it is. I mean, you have 3. I think I'm not done yet dreaming about getting my family. Well, we'll see that anyway. When it's like, as soon as you start sleeping again, the instincts kick in.
I know, it's so bad though. I'm like, literally, Keith, make me pregnant. Can I have a baby? And he's like, well, we just talked about that when you were like, basically ready to jump off the roof because you were so exhausted. We don't really have a roof here. It's like a ranch style home, but it's very low to the ground, but still, it's just like, it's so exhausting, right? Like the sleep deprivation piece, especially.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't take long for me to remember that, like 1 or 2 bad nights, and then I get off. Yeah. All right. So in the show notes, we'll obviously put where people can find you, your first name, last name. Do you want to share some handles here before I ask my closing question?
Sounds good. Yeah. So basically, merelkriegsman.com. If you want to just go dig around in the blog, and we're also going to launch a show, which is going to be on there in a few months. You can hop on my email list there. There's also at the bottom of the homepage, just for my newsletter, if you're interested in a lot of just like mindset stuff around owning your value, things like that. We also are on Instagram. When I say we, I mean me and my team. I'm not talking about we in the royal. It's like me and my team. We're on Instagram, simple like at Merel Kriegsman. So yeah, drop me a DM there. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach
Wonderful.
out.
The last question I usually like to ask, although you can answer it with something else, I love asking people, what do you want your kids to say about you in 25 years? I love just helping people imagine them with their adult kids and the legacy they've built. So if you want to weave in anything that you're super passionate about right now, you're the master of words, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I would want them to think of me as a really fun mom, right? As somebody who has contributed to them feeling very stable as individuals and very loved, unconditionally loved, right? And supported in whoever they chose to be, right? And are choosing to be, paired with the fact that they know that they can just laugh with me, right? And just have fun. And also when I think of my own mom, right? So many moments where we would literally like go like, I'm peeing my pants, and like being like, stop it. Like that's just, like my mom is a bit of shopaholic. So I spend a majority of my childhood like basically in dressing rooms at shops, just like trying weird clothes on and just having fun, and they're playing around with like identity and makeup, and it's just so many moments of laughter, right? Like that's really what I hope they'll take with them. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. I always say your life is an art, and I enjoy hanging out in your community because there's so much beauty and poetry, and it uplifts my day. So thank you for your presence in this world and for sharing your story as a fierce mama bear lion on the prairies.
Lioness on the prairies. Thank you so much for having me, Kinia. My pleasure.
Thank you. I'll see you backstage.